anonymous. It won't be on the recording. So that's us starting recording now. So yes, as I said, it's quite important. If you want to ask something and you don't want it to go out publicly, then that's no problem at all. Just put it in the chat function. So what is tonight all about then? Well, it really is a bit of a chance for us just to get together. We thought it'd be quite a good idea to hear some real stories about how racism feels, because sometimes we miss the point on that. We can't possibly know how it feels if it hasn't happened to us, but we can try and understand it. So we are here tonight, yes, to hear stories, but also to think about what me, you, all of us can do next to try and educate and eradicate racism in Scottish cricket and work together pretty much to try and understand what the access point to this conversation is. And that is really important. And Paul Reddish is going to talk a lot about that later in this webinar. It is incredible, isn't it, that in 2022, we're still talking about racism and racist abuse. It's incredible that at the end of last year, an independent review of racism within Scottish cricket was launched following allegations of racism, inequalities, discrimination within the sport. It's incredible that global equality and diversity experts planned for sport were appointed by Sport Scotland, Scotland's national agency for sport, to do that. It's pretty incredible, isn't it, that hundreds of people have come forward to talk about their experiences, both in person and also online. Not 10, not 20, not 30 people, but hundreds of them. It's incredible that cricketers who gave their all for their country were left feeling worthless, some suffering serious mental health issues as a result of their treatment. It's incredible, isn't it, that that continues today in the lower ranks too, at grassroots level, where kids feel that they're different, that they just do not belong. We're not here tonight to tick a box. We have had quite enough of that, thank you. We're here to speak to you in a safe place. We want you to contribute to the conversation. Yes, there will be subject matter tonight that, you know what, it may be a little bit uncomfortable for some of you, but that's important. It's important that we talk about this because we have to address the past in order to build on the future. Saying nothing and doing nothing is just not enough, and neither is box ticking. Doing things because you think you ought to do so, because you think you have to do so, means that you're not invested in it. You're not even close. Nothing will change if that is the way that you perceive that as working. So tonight we want you to think and to feel free to join in the conversation. There is a chat function, as I said. You can use that should you have any questions you want to put to our speakers tonight. So please, please do make the most of the opportunity to get your thoughts across. Whatever you want to say, please just say it. If you want to ask something or if you need clarification on anything, we hope that tonight in some way gives all of you a bit of a platform and a bit of a voice. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker tonight. Delighted to welcome on former Scotland cricketer Qasim Sheikh.
Hi Heather, thank you very much for the introduction. I am still just juggling a few things, still some people joining the webinar, but I think most people are now in. So yeah, you touched on quite a few subjects here in relation. Sorry, somebody I think has got their mic on. It's just playing over. If you can mute, please, that would be great. From my point of view, just following on from what you were saying, Heather, I think it's important to definitely address the past issues that have arisen, and then start to look forward. And I feel that these kind of conversations tonight hopefully will lead to the changes that we're looking for in the sport. From my own personal experience, I have once properly been racially abused on a cricket pitch many years ago for me now, when I was a teenager, actually playing for Clydesdale Cricket Club at the time, when I was referred to as a racist term. I went to a hearing, and unfortunately, off the back of the hearing, one of my ex-teammates who had stood up for me in that altercation, he ended up getting banned, and the perpetrators of racism did not get banned, which I think ultimately was the wrong message at the time. I've heard now from numerous people, it's not my place to say and speak of other people's experiences, but I've now spoken to quite a few people who I believe have spoken to the review team as well regarding racist incidents that they've faced in the club game. And on all the occasions, it was brushed under the carpet. You know, it was not there was no bans given out. And in most instances, it was people didn't hear it. So there wasn't enough evidence to take forward to take action against that. So that's a massive concern for me. I think racism is extremely serious. I don't think, you know, I've got children. I don't want to see them going through that. I'm sure there's many other parents on here as well that would hate to see their children go through something like that. So I think racism needs to be getting talked about now. It can't keep getting brushed under the carpet. I think it's obviously been a massive shock to a lot of people, and people fear talking about the subject. But it's great to see so many people on here today who are willing to have this type of conversation. I certainly feel that that's quite a few steps forward from where we've been in the last couple of months, where it's been pretty silent. I think there's been a lot of people perhaps in denial, perhaps thinking that, you know, two players have just played the race card due to what happened with their careers. And I think, as you mentioned, Heather, there is, you know, beyond myself and Majid, there is numerous, you know, it's in the hundreds now. I've seen Plan for Sport updated that there was a couple of hundred responses already to the survey that they put out after the review had been kind of come to closer to an end. But the review itself, I know, has well over 100 people that have spoken to them as well. So it is a bigger problem than just two players that have spoken out about it. In regards to the pathway stuff, I think from pathway into international sport, I do have concerns about the amount of the South Asian community that have had opportunities to play in the national team. If you look across the amount of South Asian players that are playing cricket in Scotland, for me, it just doesn't add up. I think I counted around 12 or 13 players of a South Asian descent who have played for Scotland as far back as I can remember. And some of them, you're talking, only played one or two times for their country. That, again, is a concern. You know, why are they not given more opportunities? I think that's a big factor, equal opportunities. If I compare and look at some of the South Asian players of the past and compare them with opportunities that white counterparts have had before they've really become established international players, it's significantly different. I mean, you're talking guys that probably had 30, 40, 50 caps before they've really started achieving at international level. And some have gone on to be great players, but they got a much bigger opportunity than a lot of other South Asian counterparts. So that's a concern for me. From my own experience coming through in national setup, I just don't feel it was the most inclusive environment I've ever been around. I feel that people's differences were not always welcomed, or really, maybe not even the word welcomed is maybe not the wrong word. It just wasn't acknowledged that there could be some people from different backgrounds and that their beliefs and their what's important to them should be taken into consideration. I think it was just kind of one fits all. And that, again, is a concern because we have such a diverse community playing cricket in Scotland that I think you have to take into consideration, you know, all the people that are playing and make sure they're all accommodated and feel comfortable when they're around that kind of setup. I think I've covered, I mean, I don't want to go into all personal experience. I've covered some stuff from grassroots and I've covered some stuff from concerns at national level. But I think what I'll do now, and I'm happy to take questions from anybody throughout this session, but I will pass over to Paul Reddish, who will take things on from there. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Clearly, I'm not going to give you tons of examples of personal experience of racism. It's something I've been learning about a lot since I started working with the Running Out Racism campaign over the last few months. Equalities and inclusion is something I've done to a greater or lesser extent most of my life. It's been part of my work. It's been part of my volunteering. And I've always considered myself a champion of equalities and other people and differences and all of these things. But it's been a real learning exercise for me, I would say, as somebody that was also on the Cricket Scotland board for 3 or 4 years. I had a number of blind spots. And I remember, and some colleagues that were on the board with me at the same time, I was a big advocate for gender equality at the time on the board and pushing the equality in the women's game in particular. And race and racism isn't something that I particularly explored with even being a champion for social justice and equalities. So when the Azim Rafiq story broke, it came as a bit of a shock to me, actually, personally. But then the more I looked at and explored racism and the work that I was doing in the day job, it sort of dawned on me a little bit, it shouldn't be a bit of a shock, because these are the sorts of things I'm coming across every day in communities and the experiences that some of the people that we're working with are facing in all sorts of settings. So why not cricket? So I started to listen a bit more and explore that. And the more I listened and the more I understood where people were coming from, the more I understood the depth of the problem. And I think that the key thing about racism, and I've spoken to a number of people about it now, trying to understand it, is when people think of racism, they think of direct racial abuse. They think of the use of the P word. They think of direct racial slurs. But actually, a lot of the problems that we have in cricket, some of the things that Qasim talked about, they're much more structural. They're about the experience that people have, how much harder it is in certain groups compared to other groups, and the way systems and processes and different pathways and things are set up, not deliberately always, but they are set up in a certain way, that are built in a certain mold. And what that means is that those systems and processes and procedures and the cultures that operate around them, the people that operate in them, discriminate against certain groups, particularly on the grounds of race. And that's what we've seen in cricket. I think as the reviews start to publish, yes, there'll be some direct racism that comes through. But I think what it shone a light on is that our sport has been set up in a certain way over decades, and it hasn't changed much. And that way just doesn't cater for all sorts of different groups and experiences. And I think if you asked a lot of people in and around cricket, have you suffered racial abuse? Some would say yes, a lot would say no. But if you asked, do you feel that your experience is equal, that you have the same levels of opportunities, I think the vast majority of people would say no. And that's what we're hearing through the review. And that's why we've got to take it seriously and tackle it. And what I've said to a lot of people in this who are interested in it is we have to be good allies in this, as people that have held roles in this sport and responsibility and power at different points. I include myself in that, and haven't seen this. And we've now got to take responsibility for addressing it. And that involves, first of all, accepting that whilst you may not yourself have racially abused somebody directly, by not seeing this and not looking at things through this lens and not really working through these things of equalities, we have contributed to structural racism in this sport. We may not be deliberately racist, but that is our reality. And the first point of this is to accept that, and then be willing to live in that uncomfortableness a little bit, and then start to make all of the changes that need to happen. And that's a journey that we're all going through. I'm well into it now. And I'm very much considering myself in the ally space and pushing for these changes. Everybody else is at various points on that journey, from still trying to understand it and feeling uncomfortable to some it's still in a little bit of denial. But if you look at all the facts and figures around participation up through pathways and everything else, it is undeniable that the opportunities are less on the grounds of race, and therefore we must accept that the systems that we have in cricket do discriminate. And then the question becomes, what are we all going to do about it? Rather than arguing about how good or bad, how big a problem it is, it is systemic, and we need to look at it and we need to start exploring it. And one of the things I've shared with a lot of people on this is that, as we're starting to explore that, that's okay. But if we're on the sidelines and we're not talking about it, we are effectively contributing to racism. And that's why it's really important we have conversations like this and break through that uncomfortableness. And I remember Qasim invited me to do a webinar back in October. which I think he titled "Is Cricket Institutionally Racist?" And I feel perfectly comfortable talking about it now. But I tell you, back in October when I got asked to do that, I don't think I've done a lot of public speaking. I don't think I've ever been so nervous in the last 10 years, sitting there on a webinar that I know was going to go out, getting asked questions on racism as an ex-Cricket Scotland board member by somebody that I knew had experienced racism in this sport. It was terrifying. I can't tell you how difficult that was. But every day and every week that I've embraced this and I've started to understand it more and champion it and work alongside people, it's got a bit easier. And I've got through the uncomfortableness and I'm ready to see the sport change now. And I want to help as many people as I can go on the same journey that I've been on, because it's really important. I'll hand back to you, Heather.
So I guess for me, and please do join in, everyone, if you've got some questions you'd like to fire off towards Paul or Qasim. Qasim, the subject of tonight's webinar is tackling racism in Scottish cricket. I'd like to ask you, first of all, how would you like to see it being tackled, as someone who, when you said you haven't had an awful lot of it, but we've spoken about the wider context of everything, because as both of you have pointed out, we're not just talking about someone who calls you names here or gives you a bit of abuse on the sidelines. It's the much bigger picture. So how would you like to see it being tackled?
Yeah, you're right. It's subtle and not always can people perhaps see it. And I, as Paul's just highlighted there, some people have probably been on a journey the last couple of months trying to kind of figure out if, you know, there is an issue, or trying to look back at their time with cricket in Scotland and trying to see if there was times perhaps where they were unconscious, you know, biased without even realizing. I certainly would like to see opportunities become equal. Do I have the exact answer of how you do that? No, I probably don't. But I do think this is something that maybe needs to get looked at from the point of view of having an EDI specialist come in, which I'm not. You know, what I've experienced and what I would like to see is you know, I don't have the professional background to be able to sort the problems, but that is something that I feel really strongly about. I hope the new CEO who comes in at Cricket Scotland does consider getting an EDI specialist, because we all need education on this and how we go about it. So that would be first and foremost something I think would help drive the change. Second of all, I think it's just having conversations, understanding it more. You know, we're all sitting here today. We've got lots of people partaking, which is much appreciated. And this has been something that I think has been lacking for many months. It's been quite frustrating that, you know, this has been out now in the public domain since October, November now of last year. And we're now just starting to have conversations like this. I think moving forward, I'd like to think there'll be a lot more conversations that take place. I certainly, you know, my door is certainly open to anybody who wishes to speak. There is obviously a campaign out now as well, Run Out Racism, which has a number of people that are involved in that. I know all of them are open and willing to engage with cricket clubs, to engage with Cricket Scotland as a board, and any staff members, etc. as well, any coaches in the pathway, anyone that's open to having these conversations, we're open to talking about it. So that's that would be my answer to that one, Heather, more conversations. In regards to this getting sorted overnight, I'm not deluded to that fact that it's going to take time, but I think speaking about it is a massive step in the right direction.
Have you been surprised by the number of people that have come forward in the review? We don't know what the review is going to detail yet. We're still waiting for all the answers on that, and we're still waiting to see the final outcome. But have you been surprised by the number of people who've spoken out or done the online survey and put their views across?
Yes and no. Yes, from the point of view that it takes a lot of bravery to come forward, whether you're doing it anonymously or not. It's not easy to talk about issues such as racism or experiences that you've been through. So from that point of view, I was a bit surprised when I started hearing the volume of numbers of people that are coming forward. know from the point of view that I do, and I've heard many stories through the years. I've been playing cricket in Scotland since I was 7, 8 years old. So I've seen and heard a lot through those years, and I've spoken to a lot of different people. So I wasn't surprised from that point of view, because I know a lot of people feel they have been treated differently through, whether it be at their club or whether it be going through the pathway to national level and going through a junior setup. So that would be the answer to that question.
Quite interesting to see, just everyone, if you've got the ability to maybe just put something in the chat, just to gauge your thoughts on how surprised you've been, because I'm guessing there might be some differing viewpoints in there, just the level of I'm not saying abuse that's been recorded, because as I say, we don't know exactly what's going to come out of that, but the number of people that have come forward and spoken out about it, and so what we know publicly that's certainly been out in the public domain. If you want to put something in the chat, yes, or surprised, no, not surprised, that'd be good, just so we can gauge something there. Paul, when it comes to yourself, why did you want to get involved in this? Because you've really thrown your metal behind this with the Running Out Racism campaign.
I guess I've to some extent I can't help myself. I've got to, if I think of all the things I've done in my day job and various other things, I've always been, if I see something I don't think is right, I can't walk past it. My regret through all of this is it took me a while to see that this particular thing wasn't right. You know, so I took a while to see this, but now I've seen it, I can't unsee it, and I'm not going to, I won't stand on the sidelines. And as I said to you before, I've been uncomfortable at times with it. I've sat through some, you know, I've acted as advocate for a number of people in the review where I've sat in the disclosures, and I've not been able to sleep at times as I've had to take in what people have gone through. It's been quite emotional and a real. It's been really difficult to hear some of it and then realize, you know, just what that experience has been like in your sport. And it's hard, and you know, human nature is to want to sort of just get on with things and move on and make the best of what's there. It's a very British thing, isn't it? Almost, you know, stiff upper lip and on you go sort of thing. But sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you've got to confront what's in front of you, however difficult it is to do that. And accept, as I do, that the sport that I love and I've been involved in for best part of 2 decades, you know, I've spent a good chunk of that not even being aware of the extent of this issue. But now I know about it, I want to do my bit, and my bit involves listening first and foremost, understanding what's going on for people that have experienced this, and how I might be able to make adjustments in the different roles that I've got to make things better within my power. And then with the contacts and connections I've got, what influence can I have on others to go on that journey, and start to see that. And you know, the message I always carry with this is it does feel uncomfortable. At times it's horrible. But actually that's where growth is. That's, you know, you have to put yourself in these uncomfortable positions and learn these things, and from that you can grow as an individual and you can make changes and you can deliver things. But if we shy away from it, then things don't change. So that's why I got involved, because I want things to be better. Now I understand them. Okay, great. No, thank you. Good answer. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. We've got some good questions coming in. Paul, this is an anonymous one, which again, I reiterate, absolutely fine, guys. If you want to do it anonymously, no problem. You talked, Paul, about the concept of allyship and the uncomfortable journey it takes to truly do this. What are the first steps? And actually, this is very important, and I know Paul will enjoy answering this one. What are the first steps for a person, a club, an organization to start this journey? I think the first thing is you have to. So this is an interesting point. Is the resilience of being an ally as well. In this sense, you have to be willing to accept that you're going to hear some stuff that's going to make you feel uncomfortable, and therefore you've got to get yourself ready for that. I wouldn't suggest anybody on this call sort of goes away tonight and says, right, I'm just going to have a whole load of conversations tomorrow with some people that that might have suffered abuse and expect that to go well. I think, you know, doing a bit of reading on what good allyship looks like, and it starts with accepting that you're going to feel awful. And depending on what sort of character and person you are, you know, whether you're a saver or other things, first thing you want to do is going to want to put it right tomorrow. But that's not what's needed either. The starting point of all of this is listening. And that's the thing I would stress, is that, you know, in order for us to sort of to be good allies, we've got to start by listening and understanding and appreciating the whole picture. And then if, like me, you are in positions of where you can make a difference in some settings, whether that be because you've got certain connections or influence or leadership in certain roles, then you've got to apply all those things you learned from the listening into changes and actions. So that's for me what the allyship journey looks like. You don't do it for people. You sit, you listen, you understand, you take action where you can, you give space for others, and then you just take it from there, really. The other thing I would say is, and I've said this a lot to people who've said to me, well, you know, that's all good and well, but, you know, do you really need to do it this way? Or do people really need to be this angry? Or do people need to be... A lot of people have been holding this for a very long time. So, you know, we all in that listening, we also have to accept that some people are going to be unpacking some things that perhaps they've shut away themselves for a long time because they've thought it would never change. And now they've got an opportunity to talk about that. That's going to be really emotional and quite raw. So sometimes as allies as well, you might be on the brunt of it a bit. And that's what I mean about being ready for it and not react, and that's okay. And that's right, that we should sit there and listen to that as allies, because we've not experienced it. And we've got to understand that pain a little bit in order to then process it ourselves and move forward. So, you know, it's not easy. It's probably a lot easier than experiencing racism, frankly. And therefore, I think we've got a responsibility to do it as allies, because whatever we go through in this won't be half as bad as the experience that people have had to that point.
Thank you. And just also to make it clear that I know, and you've touched upon it, but Paul has heard some quite serious conversations. So Paul really does know what he's talking about when it comes to that. David, thank you. Thanks to everyone who's got back in touch. I asked you to put whether you're surprised or not into the chat function about the level of racism and the level of people that are coming forward now when it comes to the review and giving their thoughts, the number that are coming through. David says it's not surprising at all. Racism is a societal issue and endemic. Paul's point about denial is key. It's important to accept the issue, face into it and stand against it. Indifference is the enemy of inclusion. The critical first step in addressing this is to develop greater self-awareness and to be confident enough to step into the conversation in a safe way. I think that's something that you've really just touched on there, actually, Paul. Developing greater self-awareness. So it's something that you've mentioned, Qasim, there as well with your EDI. But I wonder, how do organisations, because actually we're talking about Cricket Scotland tonight and Scottish cricket in particular, but this is a problem that will most likely arise in lots of different sports. We haven't seen a great deal of it, thankfully, but that's maybe because we just don't know it's happening behind the scenes. So how do institutions and big organizations tackle it?
As Paul's mentioned a few times, I think you need to acknowledge it first and foremost. That's the first, acceptance is the first thing. And to, you know, Cricket Scotland a few months ago put out a statement saying that, you know, they understand that there's issues of racism in Scottish cricket, and that was, you know, for me, a first step in the right direction. But it's been what's come after that I feel has been a little bit quiet. I think it's slowly but surely picking up now. But I think you have to start talking about it. I think you have to start listening to people from across the board. And I'm not just talking about people from, you know, South Asian or BAME backgrounds. I think other people need to come into the conversation. And only in the last probably month, I have had pleasure of speaking to a lot more people, and I don't like always highlighting this, but white people who have come forward and started, you know, speaking of their experiences and analysing what they've seen during the time. And it's been really refreshing to have those conversations, because I think people are starting to get their heads around it. And I think beyond that, I think we need to start with, when it comes to being inclusive, I think we need to start educating ourselves a lot more. Like I mentioned earlier, we have such a diverse community when it comes to cricket in Scotland. You just have to go around cricket clubs on a Saturday or Sunday and you'll see all different types of people. Not so much if you go and watch some boys club football, for instance, on a Saturday, it's perhaps not as diverse. And having played football at a young age, it's a lot worse. The racism in football is a lot more direct, to the point that you might even get some parents shouting racial slurs on the sidelines at you when you're playing. So that's a lot more clear cut. And I think why a lot more people from BAME backgrounds don't pursue football. I know I hear quite a lot that, oh, it's, they don't have it in them or they don't have what it takes. But I think it's because it's not very inclusive for them. And I think with cricket, it's been raised to me quite a few times, actually, how do I feel about the issue of all Asian teams forming? And I don't think that's what we really want moving forward. I think it's only a short-term fix. And the reason I think that all Asian teams are formed is because they perhaps don't feel included when they're at their own clubs. And I think that's going to be something that we need to be looking at as well, because I don't think that's going to help the cause at all on the long term. Some of you may be aware that there's an academy that's been launched down south called SACA UK, which is formed of South Asian cricketers, giving them the opportunity to get county contracts. And one of the questions I raised to one of the organisers behind that, one of the management team, was, do you think that's a good way to go? And what their response was, well, for the foreseeable, until the problems are sorted, we have to have something in place so these youngsters don't get missed in this current bracket. So I do think this needs urgent attention so that we don't have youngsters, boys or girls, who are missing out on the opportunities to progress through the pathways and get equal opportunities. So that's something I think pathway coaches, junior coaches are going to have to sit down and collectively discuss to make sure that we're taking all things into account, and also going out and educating ourselves on people from different backgrounds and how they might be a little bit different. Quite often, things like if somebody is fasting during the month of Ramadan, they may not feel comfortable to come to training. I think we should be more understanding to that. In my time, certainly coming through, you were still expected to have a go at the bleep test, even when you were fasting. I don't know where things stand on that now, but I would like to think these are things that are taken into consideration, as well as other religious beliefs as well. I've heard stories of people wanting to go and read their Eid prayer on the day of Eid, which is equivalent of Christmas Day, and being told, if you're going to go and pray the Eid prayer, then you're not going to play in the match. Although the people would have been back in time for the game. These are all things that I think need to get looked at. So education is massive. Discussion on these points is really important. But again, Heather, I don't have all the answers. Hence why I think we need an EDI specialist to become involved with Cricket Scotland. I do think it will help a lot. I would certainly like to learn from an EDI specialist as well.
Yeah, and you're not the only one. Malcolm, thank you very much indeed for putting your stuff in the chat. Malcolm was also saying, is there an opportunity to create EDI/DEI roles throughout the different levels of cricket, clubs, etc. in Scotland? And he also says he's not surprised about the structural and systemic issues, lots of denial that racism exists in cricket and wider society in Scotland. And Paul, actually looking at the different levels of cricket when it comes to grassroots and clubs is hugely important, and great to see some clubs tonight. Thanks very much, guys, for joining us. It's something that I've heard as a journalist. People have come to me and said that they have had experiences at grassroots level, for example, and at club level. So, Paul, what do you think about that, about those kind of roles and about the pathways and in general, what Qasim's just been saying?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, if people feel at the moment in institutions they don't have those expertise, it's vital they build them in. So I would absolutely agree that equality's expertise in organizations is key. But it then has to go a step further, because that the role of an EDI and anti-racism expert in an organization is then to support everybody else to prioritize this, not to do all the work. So dropping an EDI role into an organization that isn't prepared to do that won't work either. So there's a bit about the organization being ready to do what I bracket it up in these three things when I think about it in my own organization, the journey. Qasim's mentioned one, which is learning. We proactively exploring other cultures and differences and upping our own individual learning so that we remove some of our own biases and think about that in our own approaches. The second is decision making. What's the lens or lenses that we make decisions? Do we make them on purely financial and performance terms? Or do we have that lens where we go, how will this decision impact group A, B, and C? Or do we just think of it on the basis of how much it will cost or what the result is that we're trying to achieve? So we got that ability to make decisions in our organization that think about people, or do we think about finance and performance? And then there's the third bit, which is, what would the actions that we prioritize then? Are we making things better every quarter from an equalities point of view, as well as from a performance and a financial point of view? So I think the organization has to create learning opportunities, has to prioritize equality and inclusion through its decision making in the same way it would finance and performance, and then it has to take action in every week and every month and every quarter. And if they're prepared to do those three things, an ED&I expert will thrive. And if you don't do those three things, an ED&I expert will get very frustrated very quickly and nothing will change. So I think it's essential, but the organization has to be ready and it has to be willing to do the work.
Okay, thanks. Good answer there. And straight out though, I need to ask this because I know there will be people probably sitting on this webinar thinking this. How do you make it within an organization that it is not, that you grasp those people who are just doing it, as I said in the introduction, just doing it because they think they should? To me, this is a huge problem. It can't be a tick box exercise. And that's why, what Sport Scotland have done with Plan for Sport, actually seeing some action being taken, and we will see what happens as a result of the review. That is the next step, isn't it? And that's a very important step, right? What happens next? But how do you get to the stage where you make people understand in an organization and feel that it is important? Because there'll be some people who just like, oh yeah, here we go again. I'm going to be frank here, but another, box to tick.
It's not easy, Heather, and I was asked a similar question at a call with staff earlier this week. And what I would say is it's a journey for everyone. And the far side of it is denial, and then the other side is allyship, and we're all at some point on that journey at the moment. And what I say with this is we've got to keep believing that people will get to the right hand side, and we've got to keep working with them. But inevitably, if some people are in positions of power and influence and responsibility and they're fixed in the bit on this side, we've got to question whether they're the right people to hold those roles. I don't think, and this is the key thing, I'm not for a minute saying anybody that's there today has to go tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we'll have to go on this journey, and we've got to move quicker on it. We've got to give people a chance. Might need to give them more than one chance, but inevitably, if they can't come on that journey with us, we have to question if they're the right people to lead aspects of the sport. My absolute belief from doing this quite a while in a few different settings is that 95% of people just don't know what to do next. And we need to help them unlock, much like I said, how terrified I was when I went into that call back in October. There's a lot of people who feel the same in their own context at the moment. So if we can just help them break through doing that first thing, they'll start on the journey, and we can work with most people. And then the ones that are left that don't want to go there, then I think we do need to look at that. But my belief is that the vast majority of people at the moment are a bit frozen with fear. And the more we can do to sort of help people get out of that and get going on this journey, the better. And that's a hard thing to ask people to do, by the way, that have suffered discrimination. To ask them to wait while everybody catches up. And that's why allies are important in this, because
sorry, Paul, to butt in. Sorry to butt in, Paul. Apologies for that. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Yeah, when I was 16 years old, playing cricket in Scotland as a Hindu and a vegetarian, yeah, I was pinned down and fed meat in my mouth, and I was fed alcohol in my mouth.
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that it's just really sad to hear, Parag, that story again. I know you've shared with other people, and what I would say at this point is, I think just at that point I was saying that getting on this journey might be difficult, and I think I said at one point that you just have to remember it's nowhere near as difficult as the experience of the people that have suffered discrimination. One thing I can assure you, without going into personal details, is having sat in on a few review meetings and listened, there are more Parags out there, and that makes me incredibly sad. And it should make all of us wake up and understand that we absolutely need to go on that journey, and we need to do what I just talked about, which is we have to break through it. Anybody that's nervous about this, because this is not good enough. It's not. We cannot stand by and watch these things happen in cricket, in Scotland, in our society, and we have a responsibility to take this on and not leave the work to the people that have suffered discrimination. That's not good enough anymore. So I thank you, Parag, for sharing, because it's it's important. Actually, I think sometimes that people hear an individual experience like that, and I think it's been an important contribution tonight. And I think, if anything, probably supports the point better than anything I could have said about the need for us to all take this on and not leave it to those that have suffered to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks, Parag, for your bravery in coming forward tonight. Much appreciate that. Qasim, did you want to say anything as a result of that?
Yeah, I'm sure a few people on here probably listening to that, you start to get emotional. And I was aware of Parag's story, and it's heartbreaking. It's shouldn't ever have happened to a 16-year-old boy. And yes, he's probably correct that that's probably one of the more extreme things. I certainly have never been pinned to the ground and fed things that shouldn't have been put in my mouth. However, any form of racism takes its effect on people, even when you feel you're being treated differently because of the colour of your skin. I don't think maybe people necessarily sometimes understand how that feels. I mean, I, from a young age, when it was happening to when it happened to me on a cricket field, from a young age, when it happened to me on a football field, I used it kind of to spur me on at the time, and I used it kind of to say, right, well, I'm up against it here, but I need to fight fire with fire, and I need to make sure I compete and do even better. But really, should we have to be doing that? Should we have to be feeling that way? Again, I now talk about the fact that I think about my children in this. I mean, I'm not coming back onto a cricket field to play for the national team tomorrow. I'm old and I'm getting grey now, but the reason I'm out there wanting change is for the next generation of kids coming through, girls and boys. And I assure you, I've spoken to a number of parents through this, and it still goes on and it's still happening. So anyone that thinks that maybe it was a problem 10, 15 years ago, but it's not an issue anymore, I don't think that's the case. I think it's still an issue. And again, I'll say, heartbreaking to hear Parag speak and get so emotional like that. I can relate to him on some extents. Anytime you're treated differently because of the colour of your skin is just not nice. But any form of discrimination is not nice. And people that have experienced discrimination, you know, I've spoken to you about this, Heather, on a podcast not so long ago, where you talked about, along with Alison, two experienced journalists talking about the fact that you felt discrimination because you're a woman. And it's probably can't be much different, I don't think. Must be still the same feeling that you're not accepted because you're not a man. And I think with colour of your skin, it's a hard one to deal with. And as you get older, you probably start to look back at it more, and it upsets you even more. I myself am from a mixed background. So my mum is white and Scottish, and my dad is Pakistan, you know, brown skinned from Pakistan. So I kind of look at both sides of things, and I hear things from friends of mine, you know, white friends of mine, who sometimes question, you know, South Asian people's willingness to integrate. And I can see some of the challenges that are there, but do we do enough to integrate them? Do we encourage them more to integrate? I don't think there's enough done on that front. I don't think there's enough awareness raised in squads across the board to make sure that, you know, somebody is embraced and welcomed. Actually, only just recently I seen Abtaha McSood done a piece with the Scotland women's team where she got to present to them how important Ramadan is to her and her faith. That's a step in the right direction. That things like that have never been done in my time, certainly coming through. I know from speaking to a few current players in the pathways as well, it's not something that's been embraced. So to see that from the women's national team was very refreshing, and I hope we can see more of that kind of stuff, and not just from people from a Muslim background, from all faiths. You know, I've been targeted a few times during this that I'm maybe banging the drum for people from my background being Muslim, but that's not the case. Anyone from any background, I think it's important that their beliefs and their differences are embraced so they feel comfortable and their teammates know a little bit more about them.
Great stuff. Thank you, Qasim. Anonymous question here. As we've already seen, there is a lot of unprocessed trauma, and it would be good to know how Cricket Scotland should be dealing with this and offer some restorative justice and healing to those who suffered. So that unprocessed trauma. So how should Cricket Scotland deal with this and offer some restorative justice and healing to those who suffered? Who wants to take that on?
I think that, I'll come back to something I said at the start about listening first. So that, you know, for me, there's a lot of people that are now coming forward that have had experiences that haven't felt able to share, have been holding this for a very, very long time. And that is going to be, you know, unpacking that is going to be tough and difficult. And ourselves in the Running Out Racism campaign, those that have come with us, we've provided as much support as we can for that. But as some of these things get explored, the past issues, that is going to be really difficult for them. And, you know, what I would say to Cricket Scotland first and foremost is that they should be just asking the question what people need in that process, and ensure that the people that have suffered as a result of this, you know, from this point on, as they're known to them, that we're just making sure that we've got their needs in mind and what they need to get through the process and what comes next. And that's a really important part of this is owning that as we go through it. And you know, I've also been asked the question at various times, what, you know, when we say addressing the past, what does that mean? Does that mean, you know, severe consequences? For every case can be different, but there's two bits to the case, and this trauma bit is part of it. There's one of is what's actually happened that needs to be explored, and whether there does need to be some sort of consequence or whether there's just some learning in it. But the second bit is what's the impact been on that person and what needs to be done in order to restore that. It might sometimes be something as simple as an acknowledgement and apology. In some cases, it's going to take a lot of support, and that's something as a cricket community we've got to kick in alongside. But we're only going to know that if we ask people what they need from us, and that has to be part of this process. That as things are disclosed, we're asking that question, and that support's being put in place.
Okay, good stuff. So thanks, Alan. Great to have your input tonight. He says, I think Parag is right. Some people are racist and you won't change them. Do you not think there needs to be a whistleblower process?
Yeah, look, I think I think I've said at the start, there's two different, there's lots of different variations of racism, but generally you've got direct abuse like what Parag suffered, and then you've got the structural stuff. And frankly, where it's the direct abuse type things, there has to be absolutely zero tolerance. It's got to be dealt with swiftly and well, and there has to be consequence, as simple as that. And, you know, one of the worrying things is if you look at disciplinary across, you know, regional boards and Cricket Scotland and various other things, you know, there isn't much racism that comes up. There's certainly not many people charged with it. So it does lead to the question, does it not happen, or do people not have faith in the system? And that's part of this building of trust, because, you know, things like that, when they happen, there has to be a process that people trust, and there has to be swift consequences for those that do things like this. It's as simple as that. And clearly, if you look at the statistics across cricket, that's not happened. Either we have no problem with racism, or people don't trust the process and don't feel able to raise it, or when it has raised, it's not been dealt with, and that is not good enough. So yeah, we can have we've got disciplinary processes, we've got whistleblower processes, but people don't trust them, and that is a really big issue.
Yeah, that's seems to be a massive issue, and it's no surprise, really, is it, with what's happened in the past, that trust for many people isn't there. Thank you, John, for your input tonight. Good to hear from you. A lot of people, he says, will feel nervous about engaging in this type of debate. How do we help them overcome this fear? And I guess that's touching on just what you've said there, but how do we engage people within institutions where there has been racism of some kind, whether it's institutional or whether it's direct or whatever it might be? But how do we help people overcome that fear and make them think, well, actually, if I say something, it's all right?
I would say one simple thing in this case with people who are a bit afraid about starting the conversation, which is if the thing you're afraid of is saying the wrong thing and that's going to cause hurt for somebody, by doing nothing, you're already causing hurt for somebody. So if effectively you are doing the thing that you're trying to avoid by doing nothing, you're causing the problems, and therefore it's worth taking the risk that you might upset somebody. Because I tell you, at some point, we've all done it in our lives, at some point you're going to upset somebody, at some point you're going to say something wrong. But in the other 15 occasions, you're going to make things better for a lot of people, and that's got to be worth it. And we've got to get past our own fragility and start dealing with this. So that's my simple message in it, is actually the human reason that we're not doing it to protect ourselves. We're doing it anyway. There's a lot of people getting harmed through this, and we'll have to break, you know, those that are freezing, we've got to find a way of breaking through it if you care.
Okay, great. Thank you. Graham, hi, nice to have you tonight. Do you want to have a word? You've got your hand up there.
Thank you. I just wanted to first of all apologise for being late. I've just had the full council today, and then followed by the provost end of term reception thing. So I've missed some of the accounts, and undoubtedly I can imagine what Parag has reported to, and if it's anything like the stories I've heard before, then I can only imagine how traumatic it's been. So certainly sympathies from me. The queries I wanted to really bring up really is, where are the policies? I mean, I've seen that there is a race equality policy for Cricket Scotland, and, you know, where is the policy on what their definition of things like Islamophobia and racism are? Where's the policy that says this is what that is? If you breach the code of conduct in relation to these items, this will be the punishment. Because I think that's the problem for me, is that people will not report incidents, or they'll not bother, and they won't have confidence if there's no retribution in the breaching of the policy. And it's not just that there's a breaching of the policy of the cricket authorities. These acts are acts of illegal direct and indirect discrimination. They're breaches of the law. So I would expect the rules of the game and the rules of the body governing the game to fiercely enforce the law. I don't see any yet to me, commitment to doing that, given the stories I've heard. Now, I'm in the position where I'm a sort of putative sort of cricket club captain. I'm trying to set up a club in my area. You know, there's been a lot of work done by Cricket Scotland in my area in Springburn to do with indoor and outdoor cricket. New people join the game, people from all sorts of backgrounds. And to be dead honest, this furore, this scandal has sort of made me back off a bit. I'm a returner to cricket. You know, I love the game. I loved playing it when I was younger, and I've kind of now thinking, well, is this a game I really want to be involved in? I need to have confidence to bring those younger people and parents to bring their kids to these events, that I can trust the game to do the right thing. You know, if this doesn't change, then I'm out of here. I won't be having anything to do with cricket unless it definitely changes, and that there's consequences for the people who are racists. They need to be out of the sport. There's no other way forward than that. They need to be gone. The moment there is people who are proved racist gone from the game, people will have confidence to report incidents, and they will have confidence in our process. But while that guy's staying there, who would have confidence in a process when there's no punishment?
I think that's really, it's really sad to hear you say that, Graham, that, you know, you're kind of thinking twice about that. Thank you for your honesty. Had you felt anything like that before you started hearing all these stories that had come out? Had you been affected by it at all, or was this all quite surprising to you?
I'd heard it from Asian friends of mine who've played the game over the last 5 years. You know, the stories I've heard, and indeed some spillovers from the soccer. My involvement has been in football previously, so the fight against racism in football has been a strong thing that I've been involved in. And you know, the strides it took, we had to have equity officers, we had to have anti-racist initiatives, we had to do all sorts of things to change that. It's not anywhere solved, but at least there's a pathway and a journey they've undertaken as an organisation in SFA to tackle the issues of racism. I know that Cricket Scotland has said these things and said similar sorts of efforts to go on a pathway to challenge some of this stuff, but you know, these stories tell you that in practice on the ground at cricket matches, and that's not happening. And until that is enforced, and the same problem with football. You know, quite honestly, the lack of football referees from background, lack of football coaches, lack of football managers. That's a parallel you'll find in cricket as well, and that's because people don't feel safe to be in it. I'm sure that's the case. You know, I'm not saying that I have a full factual basis for that, because you know, I only have anecdotal stories from the people who I've come across in cricket, but I know it's a problem, and I know that I'm surprised. You know, from my first experience of it was back in 1981. You know, I was the 12th man in a predominantly Asian cricket team who toured Warwickshire, and I remember racist sledging from white cricketers towards us. And at least back in 1981, the umpire ruled it out of order and sent the player off. Now, if that happened in 1981, why on earth isn't that happening in our game in 2022?
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I said this at the beginning, which obviously you missed sadly, Graham. But it's 2022. We're still talking about all this. It's incredible. Would it make you feel more confident then, if given that the review is still to, you know, the final kind of outcome of the review is still to happen? Would it make you feel more confident if there were proposals like that, and that if they were implemented? And also, how quickly do you think that needs to take place to give you and others like yourself who work in grassroots or want to, you know, bring on youngsters in clubs, how quickly does that need to happen in your mind?
Immediately. And I mean immediately. I mean, by the end of the season, this needs to come in during this season. Otherwise, the consequences will be that people will withdraw from playing it with anybody beyond their own community. Because that, my feeling is that I want cricket to be a safe space. And if it means that I don't play X team because I don't want to expose kids and adults to racist abuse, then I won't play them. And if it means I can't enter a tournament because I will have to encounter those teams, then I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to expose people to harm. You have a duty of care in this sport to protect people from that stuff, legally to do so. You know, we're lucky you haven't been sued by somebody yet, because to be honest, you'd lose in court.
Are you hearing stories from youngsters and people within the community who are at grassroots level who have suffered quite a lot of abuse, or certainly are made to feel different, you know, or they don't belong and things like that?
I would say certainly made to feel not quite belonging. Yeah, I'm not, thankfully, from my own experience in Springman, not too many direct instances, one or two, but it's not prevalent. I wouldn't say that, at least because it's the game is restarting in our area in many ways, and it's new to us in the last 6 years, and lots of programs to sort of, Cricket Scotland's been partly responsible for getting people to play various versions of the game. So it's still in exploration and still in development in our area. And you know, if we're going to advertise the game as this international brilliant brand that it is, it's got to be the inclusive, safe place that we say that it is. If it's not in Scotland, then we're going to have problems. People will vote with their feet and do a sport that's more inclusive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Graham, thank you so much. Is there anyone else who wants to add on to what Graham's said just while we're here? No? Graham, thank you. Great words from Graham there.
Heather, Malcolm Dunn's waving at you.
Oh, Malcolm, sorry, Malcolm. Go for it, Malcolm.
No, that's okay. I mean, I was just wondering therefore, you know, say with existing, you know, say existing code of conduct, is it not explicit around, you know, racist abuse or that type of thing? And in a way, if not, why not? And or what, you know, within codes of conduct, what penalties can be, you know, imposed, you know, because kind of what Paul's saying is that there doesn't feel as though that there's you know, much of that happening, you know, people aren't getting.
Yeah, if I may, I think and I'll try and do this in a constructive way. If I look at if we take you know, discipline and disciplinary processes across cricket as an example, you know, I think we'd all, I hope even those that are involved in cricket on this would agree it's a bit weak at the moment, in the sense that you've got regional structures run by volunteers, all with different types of processes, all doing things slightly differently with legacy arrangements, and there isn't that sort of strength from the top saying this is our approach to dealing with these issues. You know, these are the different levels of effect, and if it's this, then we would take a strong interest, and there needs to be an expert in it. So it's sort of all just left to be done regionally by volunteers. And I think, you know, that whilst that might have been fine in a amateur sport in the well, it wasn't fine then either, but you know, certainly in 2022, I think as a sport we've got to be stronger than that. There's got to be a much stronger, more robust set of disciplinary procedures set from the top that triage these different things, are really clear on what paths happen if it's racism or some other ism, if it's a small issue, it's a big issue, where suspensions are relevant, where they're not relevant, where things are about learning, where things are about consequence, and also where jurisdiction lies. You know, one of the things I hear in cricket a lot is, oh, well, because they're not here, then I can't do anything. Well, that's not good enough either in 2022. People move around. So there needs to be the powers to be able to go, if somebody's done this, then they can't be involved in our sport. So I think the whole thing needs improving from the top down and the bottom up. I don't think those structures are fit for purpose personally. I think that, you know, there's been a lot of people that have built stuff over the years that hasn't been looked at through this lens, and all of that has undermined the trust, and then cases don't come forward. So and I'm absolutely certain that that's one strong thing that will come out of the review, that there are a number of procedural things from top to bottom and then bottom back up again that needs strengthening in order to rebuild trust on these things. And Graham is absolutely right. That needs prioritizing, because we can't move forward with some of the other improvements until people are confident that when they do experience racism and discrimination, it's going to be dealt with robustly, well, fairly, in line with a process that's built to deal with these things. And there's some element of expertise in it. And I don't think that's the case today. Heather, you win the award an hour and 15 minutes in.
Oh, sorry. You'd think I'd be aware of that. Malcolm, I was just saying, are you anything else you want to ask on that? Are you satisfied with the answer?
No, I think that's really helpful, Paul, and I think it gives, it's that clarity, around that sense as to where things are, and particularly that, top down and bottom up, it's the whole thing needs to be connected. And that sort of, like we've talked about, everybody, that willingness to buy in to this,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also I think a key thing, which I know has come through from lots of different people, and, you'd hope that people who have experienced racism or abuse or been singled out or whatever it might be, just feel the confidence to be able to speak out about it without fear of recrimination. And one thing that we have spoken about, and Paul, you've mentioned it a lot, is that confidence and giving people allies. But this is an interesting one from Charlotte. Thanks, Charlotte. She says, given the structure and systemic nature of racism in Scottish cricket and wider society, what can be done to change the structures, governance, processes, particularly at grassroots or club level, where there is reliance on volunteers on boards, committees, etc.? What's their incentive to change things if the current structures work for them? That's a very interesting question. Paul, don't hide.
Yeah, Paul, that's one for you.
Look, it's something I got asked quite early on by somebody who were very nameless, where they said, but isn't the risk with this whole thing that we're just going to lose all of the really committed volunteers because they're going to go, I've had enough, and then we're not going to have anyone to run the sport. Yeah, I guess there is a risk that some people will walk away because they're not up for this or won't want to change it at club level. And I'll come back to what I said before about half an hour ago, which is we're all on a journey. We're going to go on a journey together, and some clubs are going to get there quicker than others. But we have to get there, and it starts with the leadership at the top, and Cricket Scotland setting out an approach that addresses all of this, and then it feeds into how that what they're going to do to coach this into clubs and what their expectations are of clubs. And I think there does have to be a bit of stick as well as well as a carrot with these things as you go through. At the end of the day, all the clubs play in official cricket leagues of the associations and Cricket Scotland, and I think as part of this there do need to be some minimum standards that people meet around how they deal with equality and inclusion, different things, and I think that needs to be introduced as part of this as well. And yes, we have to give people a little bit of time to get there, but inevitably I don't think we should have clubs that are part of Cricket Scotland that aren't inclusive, and clubs fold all the time for all sorts of reasons. I don't think we should tolerate any clubs that don't prioritise inclusion and equality over a period of time when we've set out a path of how they should get there. And I think that's where we need to go. And I hope that one of the things that this review will create the opportunity to do is for cricket to be an exemplar in this. I mean, some of these things I'm talking about here probably don't exist in any sport. But why not cricket? Why not have a standard that says if you want to compete in a Cricket Scotland League, you have to commit to these things and you have to do them. And if you don't, then you can't play in our jurisdiction, and give them a reasonable time to put these things in place. So I hope we'll consider things like that too, because we certainly wouldn't tolerate clubs breaching other bits of discipline. So why would we tolerate clubs that aren't inclusive and aren't equal? And I think this is back to what I said before about putting equality and inclusion as a decision-making lens up there with finance and performance. So that's my straightforward answer. I know we can't get there overnight, but why wouldn't we have a standard, expect everyone to meet it, and then actually be okay about people moving on if they can't meet that standard. I think that's the minimum that people in this sport deserve, to feel safe and included in clubs. And if they don't, it's the clubs that's the problem.
This is one from Sheila. This came in a little while ago. Hi, Sheila. Good to have you in. Paul, you mentioned you had blind spots. What do you suggest for all of us to help reduce those blind spots?
There was a number of things you can do from thinking of it from a point of view of the teams that you operate in, or where you make decisions. You know, diversity is important. So in order for you to not have blind spots, including people in decisions that are different from you is important. And you know, if we look at different decision-making structures in cricket, whether that be selection panels or boards or whatever, they're not that diverse, particularly from a race perspective. So, you know, we don't have to, whilst we still have blind spots, we must have diversity. But then there are things you can train in terms of your own blind spots. I've talked about the two big things before, learning being one. But the second one is, as you're making decisions, just deliberately asking yourself the question, you know, what impact will this decision have on these other groups? As a deliberate thing every time you make a decision. Some organizations use equality impact assessments. You know, there's lots of tools for doing this, but it's back to what I said before about prioritizing what questions you ask about the decisions you're making and seeing the downstream impact on those things. And if you're more inquisitive about that and you start asking those questions, along with having, you know, more inclusion around the people that make the decisions, 9 times out of 10, you'll find out where your blind spots are. And the 1 time out of 10 that you don't, you'll learn the hard way and you won't do it again. But you know, that would be how I would go about it. Greater diversity where the decisions are, and asking yourself better questions before you make decisions from an equalities lens.
I wonder whether this has almost been answered to a certain degree already, but Fraser, thank you very much for your input tonight. He says, do you guys feel that the EDI lens is strong enough to view sport through the current strategies are underpinned by UN human rights and sustainable development goals? If all participants are viewed as the rights holders that they are, would this present a stronger message to clubs and individuals? And I guess, again, that's kind of touching on what you were speaking about as well, Graham.
Yeah, I would say that you know, race equality is about a rights-based approach to equality. That's what it means. It means that you have the right to expect treatment that is equal, to end discriminatory practices which exclude you from decision-making processes that affect you. So to my mind, it's a necessity to have a human rights approach to how we do any form of equality. But I suppose where other sports have had problems like this and what they have done to deal with it, we should learn from them. And I suppose football's not perfect. It's still got some problems with racism in crowds and in the structural thing about access to training and development and obviously management. I've said all that, but I do think they have moved on. Fans now are routinely reporting racist incidents at games now to clubs, and clubs are routinely now expelling and removing season tickets from spectators who behave that way. That's partly because now nearly all of the major clubs in the first tier of football have black players or have foreign players. So it's the culture has changed, partly because the demographics have changed, and the demographics do inform the culture. So I think that needs to happen with our game as well. You know, there's definitely scope for it to happen, but we need to have a very conscious, thought-out process. Also, the institution, as an institution, you know, a lot of the discussions we've had have presumably been about acts of direct, very overt racism. But actually, most racism is not so overt. It's subtle, it's structural, it's exclusionary by default, by excluding you from the rooms. You know, if you decide to have your socials in a pub and alcohol is involved, then you're including people who don't take alcohol. You know, so just not having that form of exclusion, having it in a building which is not suitable for people who've got access issues. Simple, basic things are still not thought about, and until those become mainstream part of your thinking and how you organize yourselves, the culture can't change. And, you know, so there's a lot of things to talk about, but I won't bang on this. you know this stuff, I'm sure you do.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. Wise words there. John, you've got your hand up. What would you like to say?
Yeah, so mine's a question for Qasim. So one of the things that we've spoken about quite a bit tonight earlier on was allyship. So that's probably a journey that I think I'm on in terms of trying to become a better ally. To you, what makes a good ally, and how can somebody like me get better at it?
Well, you were terrible at the start, John, but you got better and better as the days went on. Listen, first time we spoke, I remember like it was yesterday. You were petrified practically to have the conversation. And you've been on a journey ever since then. And you have started to understand the issues, understand that just because you're having the conversation, that nobody was ever saying that you're racist. You, John Egan, are a racist, but that's what I think everybody feels to start with. If I even have this conversation, I'm scared that I might say something that is racist, and you never have. You've asked me questions. You've started looking back at your life and things that you experienced along the way that maybe at the time you didn't think there was anything that wrong with it. But as you go through life, it's kind of like me in high school. I'm not going to lie and say that we all, my year at school, for instance, it was like, oh, girls can't do that. They're no good at that. And that was just because of the institution I was part of, that, it was kind of inbuilt in you, that there was this mindset that, oh, girls can't do that. And as you go through the years and you start to educate yourself a little bit more, we're now in 2022, and I find myself being a massive admirer of women in sport and watching different women's sports, but it wasn't part of who I was when I was younger. So it just shows you can change, you can evolve. And with you, John, you've properly made effort to talk about these things and have these conversations. And I think you became more and more comfortable as we started to go along, to the point that you came to the Glasgow Central Mosque with me to visit, and we went there, and I was really impressed by you that day, because you went in there and I thought you were maybe going to be in a rush. You want to get out of here as soon as possible. We were going to play pool afterwards. I thought you were more interested in the pool, but you were wanting to hang around and ask me different questions, although you did thump me at pool afterwards as well, which was a tough pill to swallow. But I was just really overwhelmed by the way you kind of embraced it, and you wanted to find out more about it. And that's ultimately what an ally is to me. Paul's obviously a perfect example of an ally. He's championed and supported a lot of the victims of this day and night, to be honest. Guy's got a busy life. He's got 3 kids at home, but he still, puts in the time to anybody who needs some extra support. And that, people like yourself, John, it's very heartwarming to have people like yourself who wish to support and be allies. And I think if more people come into that space, they'll probably find that by picking up, contacting somebody who's maybe experienced racism and just having a conversation with them and acknowledging the fact that they've been through that, and you want to talk to them about it, you probably find they'll really appreciate it, rather than shout down the phone at you or shout at you in person. They'll appreciate that you want to speak about it at all. So yeah, that's how important I think allies are in all of this.
Thank you. Anything else you wanted to say or ask, John?
No, listen, just think it's really it's really relevant, because talk about a journey. One of the things that I think Sheila brought up, talking about blind spots. I've found countless blind spots, and I think I'll probably find more. And I think it's important to admit that. Sometimes I think it's easy. I probably put myself in the not racist box. It's really easy to be there, because I probably think everybody on this call is not racist, but it's quite a comfortable place to be. And I think sometimes you need to probably move out of that box and try and find a bit of a voice. But when you do that, you do learn things about yourself. And as I said, I've found that pretty challenging at points, because I found blind spots and I didn't think I had any. But you just need to move on with that, I think.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed to both of you. David, thanks for that recommendation. Good book recommendation from David. Haven't read that myself. Don't know whether any of you guys have. Michael Holding's book, Why We Kneel, How We Rise. Anyone read that? Don't know whether anyone has, but yeah, I'll get onto that personally. Thank you, David. Does anybody else have anything that they want to say or contribute towards the conversation with, or add to, or tell their story. Obviously, we've heard some pretty traumatic stuff from Parag tonight. Unfortunately, we couldn't go into great details about that because I think that one is now in the hands of the courts. So that's why we couldn't really go into more detail. But if anyone wants to say anything else, please do feel free. It's been brilliant just having an open conversation tonight and just hearing the thoughts of you all. And yeah, just kind of discussing how it's not nice, is it? It's uncomfortable. But that's good that we're talking about it, because nothing will change if we don't talk about it and we don't hear from, brilliant stuff from Graham about the grassroots level and taking things forward from there, because we've got to start there, right? It's good that we're talking about international cricket and Scotland and things like that, and that has its place, and it's extremely important. But it's also extremely important that we look at lower levels as well and see what's happening there. And Paul, I know that you've been looking at that a lot recently with Running Out Racism.
Yeah, I think that's been a journey in itself. Those that do or don't know about the Running Out Racism campaign, it's all volunteers. We've set ourselves up with a task of two things. One is to support people individually that have wanted to go forward with the review and give them a safe space to talk through how to address it and be there alongside them. But the other thing that we're there to do is to support the sport to make the changes that they need to make. And we're having a number of conversations with regional associations, Cricket Scotland and others, and we go into that with the spirit of wanting things to be better and wanting to work with them. We've also been critical at points, and we'll continue to be where we feel stuff does need calling out. But we'll do that because we love the sport and we want this to work, and we'll also do that whilst absolutely offering a bridge to work forward on how things can improve. So I hope the campaign and can continue to deliver on both of those things, support the people that have suffered a bit, help the people that are trying to work through this to see the changes, raise awareness where we think things are going wrong, with a view that we can hope get them back on track again. And I guess I would just like to take the opportunity to say a huge thanks to Graham as one that's on the call, a number of other people that have spent tens and tens of hours with that campaign, working together to really highlight some of these issues and get the changes. That I think without the bravery of Qasim and Majid first, and then the campaign kicking in after it, we'd be nowhere near where we are today in highlighting all of this. So huge thanks to everybody that's put themselves out there really and put hours and hours and hours of their own time into something that I know they deeply care about, and also in a lot of cases have been deeply impacted by personally. And doing those two things together is really difficult. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank everybody that's helped support this.
Yeah, here. And just a final question from me for you, Graham, if you don't mind. If you were to be put in front of the powers that be now who can make those changes, what would you say to them to bring them together to find a solution to, we've spoken a lot about allies, haven't we? And people having the confidence to speak out. What would you say to them that they need to do to make people comfortable in their own space to be able to talk out wherever they are, whatever organization it is, because I'm sure there's people listening on the webinar tonight who aren't just involved in the world of cricket?
Well, like any employer, and this is the thing, there has to be an admission. And I'm a member of Glasgow City Council, so I'm very consistent about saying that my institution is institutionally racist and discriminatory. Being able to just say that straight and just acknowledge it then leads to the possibility of you doing something about it. There are some specific measures which I've had to take and committees that I'm involved in to try to address some of those discriminatory barriers. They're to do with, where we advertise posts, having internally advocates spies posts, having an anonymized application, so you can't tell whether somebody's gone to a Catholic, Protestant, or overseas school. Things like that we've had to directly change in order that the institution doesn't discriminate against the applicant and the person who's employed by the council. We set up networks of staff within the organisation so that they can speak for themselves and help us develop the policy. So I know that it's a complicated thing. So I'm not telling Cricket Scotland to do something that I'm not prepared to do and to take on. I know that these things are difficult, but it requires some very specific measures. One of them is anti-racist education. And you have to teach people to be allies. We've had to train over 500 teachers in leading positions in schools with a new anti-racist curriculum that acknowledges white privilege and the power structure behind racism. It's not the words, not just the discriminatory words, it's structures which actively exclude. It's rooms that make decisions without non-white people or women present. That's what we have to disappear from the game, that those rooms where power and decisions are made are inclusive now. That's what has to happen. It's difficult to do, but it just requires commitment to take the actions that will make that happen. I know that what it takes, because in the last 4 years we've doubled the BME workforce by the measures we've taken. We know these measures work. We have meant that people are more confident to report racist incidents to us when they happen. That's why you're hearing now that X number of racist incidents happen in Glasgow schools, because people are more confident and the teachers are more trained up to know when to report it correctly, so that we have a sense of how big the scale of the problem is. You need to have people have confidence in your structures, that you will respond. You will get racism. It's not that you will eliminate racism, it's what you do when you get it, when you experience it, what's your reaction as an institution to it. And that's what I want to see from Cricket Scotland. I want to see the same consistent reaction to it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Graham. Great answer there. And just finally, Qasim, last word goes to you, I think, tonight. Thank you so much to everyone for all of your input. I'll come back very briefly after you've given your answer to this. But Qasim, we've heard there about the importance of working with institutions, and some great thoughts there from Graham. For you, what's the conversation you want to have now?
I've already had some conversations. I don't want to go into who I've had conversations with, but the conversations are slowly but surely starting, and that's welcomed. What Graham was just mentioning there, in the last 4 years, the amount of people that have come from the BAME community have been added to the council, and I think that's something that I said very early days when I was on Sky Sports at the start of this, and I was asked what I wanted to see. I want to see more diversity in positions of decision making. I think, and I'm talking about across the board, talking about a board level, talking about coaches, umpires, all the way through at regional level as well. I think you have to have some diversity across the board there, so that decision making is equal and fairer. And I don't think it needs to be a tick box. I think you need to be prepared to listen to what other people have to say, and I don't think that's always been the case. That's what I want to see, and honestly, it's been heartwarming to see so many people on here today, willing to sit, listen. Some ask questions, some have input. It's been great. I think it's a step in the right direction. I hope we have lots more conversations like this. I hope people that have come on here today feel a little bit more confident, perhaps, about when they go off this call, about having these conversations, because everybody on here today, I would hope after the session will be an ally themselves, and that can filter through to many other people as well, and encouraging others to be prepared to have the conversation as well. So yeah, just big thanks from my point of view to everyone who's attended. Thanks for all your input, those who have partaken. We've heard from somebody today in Parag who spoke of a really heartbreaking situation that happened to many years ago, and these things just cannot happen anymore. And I would hope in a year's time we're having this conversation again, and we're in a totally different space, and we're talking about all the positive things that are happening in the sport. But unfortunately, it's been a little bit slow And therefore, I think people are prepared to not just speak out and let it go. You know, we want to see the changes, and that's certainly where I will be coming from in all of this, that if the changes are there, you'll see people embrace it. But it needs to be consistent, not tokenism, not just one-off, oh, we're doing this, and then that happens, and then nothing happens off the back of that. Consistency is what we all seek. And I think if and when that happens, we'll be in a much happier place, and people will not need to feel scared about having these conversations, and allies will be comfortable calling this out themselves. It won't need to be people of color. So for instance, if I see somebody being sexist towards a young girl or a woman, I feel really comfortable that I would call it out. I don't think people are maybe that comfortable across the board in calling out racism. I'd like to think it will get to that point. And by no stretch am I saying that we still got a lot of work to do in the women's game as well. We do, but we've been acknowledging it, and we are talking about it. I just want the same to happen with racism, and it not to be diluted through other issues and be focused on. And once you can sort that out, I'm sure we'll be in a much happier place. So yeah, quite a long-winded answer, Heather, but thank you to everybody that's attended. Really appreciate it.
Long-winded, but a good one. Thank you very much indeed, Qasim, for your honesty tonight. Thanks for everyone who's taken part in the chat as well. Kate says allyship is certainly one of the things that she will take away from tonight. Thanks to Pam too. She says thank you to both you, Paul and Qasim, for your openness and honesty tonight, and for pushing each of us to challenge ourselves around our role and our blind spots. And Sue, thank you also for your input tonight. Thanks to everyone for their honesty and for giving us the chance to listen to your views and idea. And thank you very much indeed also to Jonathan, who says, thanks guys. As you say, this is about listening, particularly for those of us with blind spots. This evening has helped provide a great opportunity to listen. So hopefully each and every one of you has got something out of this tonight. We hope, that you've learned something, you've maybe taken something new away, you've heard things that maybe have been a little bit surprising, but maybe you want to start making changes. Some great answers from all of you. And if you have any further questions, by the way, after tonight's meeting, or indeed how you can help when it comes to furthering this conversation, check out runningoutRacism.org. That's Paul's Running Out Racism website, and you can, I'm sure, ask Qasim for any further guidance. But thank you one and all for your time tonight. It's been brilliant to have you along. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Do you want to chat, Graham?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry?
Did you want, were you just saying goodbye?
I was just clapping.
Okay, bye. Take care, Graham. Thanks for your input.
Can you do the should go out host? I'm assuming it's who was listening to most and then disappeared halfway through.
Who's HT?
Don't know.
Trying to.
I think Qasim can do. Should we do a WhatsApp call and close it down?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, I'll call the WhatsApp. Oh no, here we go. There you go. Done.
Is that everyone off?
Yeah.